The question that I do have is my child explodes over small things. How do I know if it's anxiety or something else? And that's like a really good question. The thing is that the first thing to understand is more your child's nervous system. So our nervous system, excellent. Okay. So we do have somebody in the background that just wants to be listening. Sorry. Perfect. Sounds good. So one of the parents in the background just said that they're listening and they'll pop in questions as they have need. So the thing to understand is a child's nervous system. And a child's nervous system, well, anybody's nervous system. Our nervous system is like a muscle. The more that you work it, the quicker it is to react and the stronger that it becomes. So we have our stress nerve that kicks in whenever we feel that there's a threat, whenever we perceive a threat. So we're perceiving, right? And if there is, and that perception of a threat can be so many things. It could be in a classroom with a kindergarten kid. It could be that they made a mistake. It could be like, you get this a lot with gifted kids where when everything was so easy for them and all of a sudden they can't do anything, they don't know how to handle that. And that becomes like a threat to them. It could be that they, experience a lot of visual or auditory. I know my son used to get so overwhelmed just being on a schoolyard because he could tell you after almost what every kid is wearing, what they were all doing, like all the kids in the schoolyard, like it was crazy. And you think about how much that information overload goes in. So a threat, a trauma is too much, too soon, too fast. And so when we think of anything too much, too soon, too fast for kids, there can be so many things that happen that they just weren't ready for. They didn't have the emotional, intellectual maturity to be able to handle. And so all of those things keep hitting their stress system. It could be that they're very sensitive to things. So just the way food feels in their mouth, or they may be sensitive to taste and smells, and those might be overload for them. It could be that there are things going on in the house that for that child can be a struggle. I know for me, one thing is like the smells, synthetic fragrances, that once we cleared those out of our house, my one child and myself noticed a huge difference. So it's different for every kid as to what these threats can be. I'm going to also say my one son in kindergarten, in senior kindergarten, the teacher was like, he started telling me that he started acting up. And I'm like, that's really interesting because he also started wearing 2 pairs of pants, 3 shirts to school. And I'm like, and they do a lot of carpet time. Like, did you change your cleaner or anything? She goes, oh yeah, there's this really new great pine scent. And I'm like, oh, yep, that's probably doing it to him because now all those scents, the synthetic fragrances for him hit his nervous system. So synthetic fragrances, essentially what they go in and they disrupt your hormones and your mood regulation as part of that hormones. And they take over for the regular hormone that should be doing that job, that should be regulating your moods or doing whatever else is there. And for those of us that are very sensitive to smells, I kind of think of this like a bomb sniffing dog, right? So when one child is saying that they smell something or see something or hear something, that's almost like they have that capability of a bomb sniffing dog where we don't know that the bombs are there. We don't know that the drugs are there, right? We don't know that somebody's about to have an epileptic seizure, but these dogs do. And so that is kind of like our kids might almost have that sixth sense, that extra sense. And they have that ability. Doesn't mean that it's not there. It means that other people aren't as sensitive to that. So all of these things keep hitting their nervous system. For my one son in school, like the noises, the sounds, old schools, everything reverberates off of it. That would just be so much for him that he was hearing every tap of a kid, every sigh that a kid was doing, every tap of their shoe, every sound down the hallway, every sound echoing, that sometimes just going into the classroom was too much for him. So we think of all of these things as we often think of them being highly sensitive or their anxiety, they're worrying about things. So it might be a child too that's just worrying about change might happen. What if routine doesn't happen? What if I don't know how to do something? Fear of making mistakes, all of these things are all hitting their nervous system, because to that child, they're perceived threat. So that nervous system is constantly kicking in. And when that nervous system is constantly kicking in, eventually that's when we get heightened outbursts. Now, if we're looking at the stress animals, we have the shark, which is like on the prowl, looking for alert, can like hit, yell, scream, get really angry really fast. We have the clownfish that is worrying all the time. They're not liking change, not wanting to, leave their anemone, leave their home, like Merlin's dad in Finding Nemo. They like to really stick together, stick with the person that they feel comfortable with. So even in a school or a classroom, they may feel really comfortable with one teacher and not another, and then they may not want to go and transition to that other class, because that they're leaving that safety of that one teacher. Same thing at home. Like, I know my one son never ever wanted to leave me to go to school, because I was his safety, his grounding. And I understand that now, but I didn't understand it then. And it's just having that set of safety for those kids as well. So we have the shark, we have the clownfish, then we have the turtle, the one that shuts down, which we may see those kids as the well-behaved kids, the kids that do as they're told, not trying to go outside of the box, not trying to cause any troubles. Those kids that can actually be a stress response in some kids as well. And those are all your nervous system kicking in. So going back to this question of when they explode over small things, how do you know if it's anxiety or something else? I don't often even think, is it anxiety? I think, okay, something stressed their stress system. And if it is, they are somebody who worries a lot and they do it in clownfish a lot, then that is their worrying. And that would be, anxiety that's kicking in, but it could be all kinds of other things, sounds, tastes, smells. It could be that their brain has to process so much. They may be academically ahead, but they may not be able to get the answers on paper. And that's a different part of the brain. It's not the academic part, it's the executive functioning part. When they are trying to focus all day, when they're trying to perceive, socially what other kids are wanting and needing. It can be, or not being able to perceive when another kid needs a turn on a slide, or not being able to inhibit and stop themselves. They're constantly touching things or blurting out and saying things. And when they know these things, they're really, really happening when they know all of this stuff, when they know that, like, they're trying to not touch things. They're trying to not blurt things out. They're trying to pay attention more, to not move. That is all taxing their nervous system. That's all taking a lot of energy and bandwidth. And then their nervous system doesn't have a lot of time to be able to really recover in itself. And so we just look at everything in our environment now. Our environment has so many different stressors, right? Like just even screens. And I get interviewed all the time on screens, where I believe screens are with us. They're amazing. My kids homeschool on screens. And what we haven't been taught in society, the same thing with nutrition, the same thing we've had to do with exercise, the same thing with like junk food, all of these things, is that we've had to learn, how do we do this in moderation? How do we do this in a healthy way? How do we not overtrain in exercising, but how do we not undertrain in exercising? How do we learn how to eat healthy and balanced, but also like enjoy the fast food once in a while, or, all of these things. So we haven't been taught that. It's kind of been like, here's a screen. We're also going to pay people at certain companies that their job is to psychologically understand how to keep you sucked in onto the screen, how to get those hormones flowing and the dopamine in order to be able to like have you wanting to be on and be on and be on these screens. And we're not ever teaching these kids and parents, we haven't been taught, our generation, how to be able to manage the screens. So I'll actually, you know what? Why don't I dive into that in a minute in this call, because we have time to help you understand how to start doing that. But let's first just go back to this question too, that anytime you're on a screen and they're actually giving you these dopamine hits, that's all taxing your nervous system. So when we are on social media, when we're getting emails coming in, all of this is sending this rush to us of this cortisol that's like, oh my God, this is exciting. And so good stressors and bad stressors, your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It's still doing reps, it's still doing exercise to strengthen it. So we need to be able to start working that other side to be calming it down. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question. And so we do have a question in here as well about anxiety and ADHD. So with a child that's diagnosed with anxiety and ADHD, it's fascinating because there's this whole cycle too with ADHD that these kids, their brains are constantly flying. Their brains are constantly flying. So this ties into the screens part too. So if we think of ADHD, we often think, okay, we need to teach this child to have sustained attention. But if I'm to sit here with you and I am going to ask you for 1 minute to sit here and breathe with me, just focus on inhaling and exhaling out of your nose. So let's even do this for like 10 seconds. So we're just going to do this for 10 seconds, and then I want you to tell me what happens. So start focusing on breathing in and out through your nose for 10 seconds and only focus on the nose. That's it. Only focus on the breathing. Do not think about anything else. Okay, ready? Let's go. Okay. How many other thoughts went on in your brain other than the inhaling and the exhaling? I'm going to guess a bunch, especially us being parents, right? You probably had all these other things going on in your mind about, oh, she's talking about ADHD. She's talking about this, thinking about all these things and not just focusing on the breath. Had I let you go on for a minute, what would have happened is you would have kept bringing yourself back into focus. You would have been refocusing yourself, going, no, I'm supposed to focus on my breathing. And then another thought will pop in. And then you go, nope, need to focus on my breathing. So quite often the difference between somebody who has ADHD, somebody who has attention struggles versus somebody who doesn't, is their ability to refocus. But quite often we're thinking this child needs to focus more, which is just not possible. And so when we're on screens as well, think of in your brain, we have a whiteboard. And all of in our whiteboard is everything that we are thinking about and having to do. So everything that just popped in your mind when we were doing that breathing, as I'm speaking, there's always going to be things popping up in your brain, but you refocus on what I'm saying. And we have this whiteboard with all of those things. So when you're on a screen, there are colors and there are images and there are tabs we keep pushing, and new things keep coming in and going and coming in and going, especially when a kid's playing like a video game or any of these, even the educational games are made to do this, to keep their attention, right? So what's happening on a video screen and why they can really stay focused is because they are refocusing on so many different things. Oh, this has happened. Oh, this has happened. Oh, there's a shiny thing. Pop, 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 right? So it keeps pulling their attention and helping them refocus on whatever they need to focus on that video game. Then we step off of that video game and we still have all of these things in our whiteboard. When there are so many things in our whiteboard, we can't refocus. There's so much. We have the focus, we get the brain fog, we struggle to do things. So when I'm looking at this from screens, and I'll go into the refocus piece with kids as well. But the first thing for screens that I do teach, what we teach, and I'm actually going through it right now. So this book, I'm actually creating this little mini series right now, because she has in her book, like week 1, there we go. Week 1, I'm actually redoing her program that is all neuroscience based, all about how to clear the whiteboard. And it is 12 minutes of breathing a day. Now, do my kids do 12 minutes? No, right? But my kids know that before they get on a screen, we do breathing. When they get off, we do breathing. Now, what I'm going to be making in her Peak Minds, it's a variation of different types of breathing, and the combination of the different types of breathing cycled only one each day. And I start with 3 minutes a day, working myself up to 12 minutes a day. It clears your brain so much. It clears that whiteboard and it helps bring that brain fog, help bring your focus back. It's unbelievable. It's the neuroscience, the research into what she's done has been crazy, that I was like, I could create my own thing, but this is all research backed. So why don't I do this and give her 1,000% of the credit? Because this is what I do with my clients. So with kids, we have to break this down as far as kids go as well, more so. So I use the app, One Deep Breath. Let me just show it to you quickly. One deep breath. If you're going to get one deep breath, it's going to ask you to do this, like, here's 7 days free and then you pay. Just click the X and close that box, and then you get it always for free. It's only going to give you up to like 5 minutes of breathing, but you never need more than that with kids. So, whoops. I don't know if you can see. One deep breath. So we're on this here. This is really bad lighting. It's facing right into my window. So let me show you. So my kids do this HRV. I don't know if you can even see this good. The HRV, heart rate variability, is what they do. And when we hit play, and I'm just going to hit start, what happens? So he's going to chat for a bit. I'll turn him off because I'm not paying. I don't get the intro that I can skip. But this circle here goes out and in. So they get the visual. They also get the sound, because it'll make the sound of the inhale and the exhale. And then you actually have, if you're on the inhale or the exhale. So it's backwards for me. You either have, if you're on the inhale or the exhale, and it walks you through what to do. So my kids will do 3 minutes of this before they hop on a screen, and they do 3 minutes of it after. They've actually gone up to 5 minutes now because they're so used to it, and it's a part of what they do with their screens. So that's one of the things that I do with screens. But my kids also do their breathing every morning as well. That's part of their morning routine. That for any teachers, like in a classroom, getting this for free and doing it. There's also other ones. If you are a teacher, message me, because there's some really cool kid meditation podcast apps that, like, you can be an animal and you can go places and do things that, if you started your day with your kids like this, if you came back from recess and did this with your kids, 3 minutes, you will start noticing that you do this 3 times during your day with the kids. Even if it was more, yes, it's 3 minutes, but the kids get so used to doing this then that they start bringing the skill into something else. So this is where, when I talk about my cares, and when we're talking about the last section of cares, where we're doing the 5th habit, which is doing things outside of a stress state to help them when they're in a stress state. They can't think when their shark, their clownfish, when their, turtle is kicking in. They can't think at all. So when those things are kicking in, they can't, unless it's something that's automatic and their body's used to. So if outside of that, you have them doing this breathing frequently, and there's so many options that you can choose on this One Deep Breath app. The HRV is your body's ability to bounce back from stress. So it's a really great one to do. And it's very simple. So if you get them used to doing that, I can give you all kinds of other options too, to try with your kids and see what you like best in a classroom or at home. Just email me and ask. But doing that in microdoses, what you will start noticing is when they start getting upset, they'll start being able to breathe. They can't until they've done this so many times outside of the moment. So if you start doing it in the moment, and what you'll find is the kids start resetting more, they start doing the breathing, you start bringing it up in class too. You're like, okay, class, let's just all take one deep breath now, in through your nose, out through your mouth, and they'll start doing it. And you tell them why. You tell them why. And it's always nose. Nose is more the resting system that I was explaining of the nervous systems, not the stress system. Mouth is stress system. So you'll see when a child starts getting worked up, if they switch to breathing through their mouth, or they breathe through their mouth all the time, that child has more anxiety, and that child will have more focus and attention struggles, and that child will have more outbursts. Same with adults, completely. So teaching them to do it through their nose more often and doing the more reps that you can with those kids, you're going to see through your school year as such a change in those kids, such a change, as they're able to start doing reps, exercises for their resting system and not their stress system. And then they'll start being able to bring that into the moments, into the struggles with them. So that's my first thing that I do with screens, is actually like, I go through my kids and do this peak minds part. If you do this, this is like your ability to handle screens. And so I'm literally building that out this week, because I already do it with clients and it's worked amazing with my one-on-one clients. So I'm like, okay, let's bring this out for everybody in such a more simple way where I can just hand them videos, quick to do. So that's the one piece. Now, if we're looking at ADHD as well and the refocus, let's take reading, for example. So a child who has ADHD or a child who has attention without a diagnosis, you might notice that when they were younger and they were reading little books, they maybe love to read. They maybe love to read little books. They maybe love to read like board books, whatever, because they could sustain the attention and they could stay focused that long without them needing to refocus. But once they get into chapter books, bigger print books, their mind wanders like crazy. And you might see that they actually loved reading, but they stopped reading. And often that's a big part of that disconnect. So unless they're having reading struggles with the larger words, so there's definitely other pieces to all of this puzzle, but fascinatingly, most of the reading struggles that kids do have go back to executive functioning struggles. Who I've learned executive functioning from is an SLP, speech and language pathologist. And 20 years ago, she realized that most speech and language issues are actually executive functioning: attention, perception, verbal, nonverbal working memory, inhibition. And I know my son, with being able to write on paper by hand or write like grammar, punctuation, I didn't work on any writing or anything, any grammar with him. We've only worked on executive functioning, and he wrote me a 2-chapter story with perfect grammar and punctuation, because it was executive functioning, as she'd said, which I didn't believe her at the time when she said it. I was like, no way, he was diagnosed with a learning disability. But it's not there anymore. So that's the thing, is understanding as well when like you're seeing reading struggles or something, that it could be attention, it could be other parts of the executive functioning struggles. Then when we're looking at this reading, if we want to help a kid who has attention, what you do is you teach them about a flashlight. So what happens is when we are losing our attention, our focus, we have our floodlights on. We're like, oh my God, shiny object. Oh, look over there. Look at this. Look at that. Like everything's everywhere, right? And they're all over the place and they're not getting their flashlight. So if you have younger kids, you can actually bring a flashlight. They can all like do a craft with flashlights in their classroom. And you can all create these flashlights and then go, okay, where's your flashlight pointing now? So when you want their attention on stuff, you can ask them to get out their flashlight and point it on what you want them to focus on. And when a kid isn't paying attention, it's usually that they didn't have the ability to refocus. So then you start using the cue constantly of, where's your flashlight shining right now? You're not telling them to focus their flashlight on what they need to be. You're reflective questioning with them, which means you're actually getting their brain to start getting in the habit of, when they're off, they start asking them their question of, where's my flashlight supposed to be? And they'll go, oh, on this. And then they'll like put their flashlight there, or they'll say on this. You're like, great. Okay. Point your flashlight on what we're supposed to be doing. And they'll do it. And this could take you all the school year. It could take a couple of school years for certain kids with certain attention. And it could happen really quick with other kids as to how quickly they get into this. But you'll start seeing too that other kids will start asking other kids in a classroom, where's your flashlight shining right now? If that kid's not paying attention, and they'll start doing it in a kinder, gentler way of helping to refocus that child. And the child's like, boom. So the more reps that they do. So we teach these kids about their flashlight. And then what you can do, if this is even a kid like middle school, however, you can then have them where you're reading a book with them. A little caveat on chapter books is, the older that the chapter books get, the more chapters it takes to actually set the scene and get ready, and the boring stuff happens. So that's where sometimes I would either read it and give them a quick synopsis of what's happening and then get into the good stuff, let them know characters and stuff, or I would do an audio a little bit if they're better with audio, if they are. Some aren't. However their brain learns and reads, to kind of get past that boring stuff if they're older. and get into the good stuff where they're really getting dialed in and focused on that. But what I would do is I would say, okay, let's just set a timer for a minute. That's it. We're just asking them for a minute, because a minute, as you saw when we did that breathing, that 10 seconds, your mind wandered. So in a minute, their mind is going to wander a lot. So you get it for a minute and you're like, anytime that you're reading, if I see that you're moving your eyes off the page or whatever, I'm just going to ask you, where's your flashlight shining right now? In a fun, kind, curious way, right? You'd be like, oops, back over here. And teach them, this is repetitions. Teach them this is practice. I'm not expecting you to get it. The more that you actually are off at the start, the more we get to practice, the faster you'll get there. So encourage them that it's okay to do this, and tell them that you do this all the time. You've just learned to eventually refocus, because her mind wanders all of the time. So in helping these kids, you're going to sit there and be like, okay, let's do a minute, and let's count how many times you do it, and make it fun. Like, how many times is not a bad thing. It's like, how many times did we get to practice this? It's all in how you phrase it. And so you get to practice it that many times with the kids. And then you go, okay, great. So if in 1 minute it wasn't many, go, we didn't have to practice that hardly any times at all. Let's move the time up. What do you think? Should we do 1.5 minutes? Does that work for you? And let's see how many times we can practice it in 1.5 minutes. And so you're getting them to practice this refocusing. We're not getting them to see the refocusing as a bad thing, or the loss of focus as a bad thing. We're bringing it back. Because what happens in these kids is they're told so often they need to focus, or they're spending so much time and energy on that their anxiety can go up. They're worrying that they're not going to be able to focus. They're worrying that they're not going to be able to get their work done because they can't focus on it. They're worrying that they're going to miss things, right? So some of these kids go to the worry. What you might find out with ADHD kids too, is they sometimes become the class clown, because if they're able to interrupt and joke and stuff, it shows that they didn't lose, it takes the focus off of them actually losing the focus. So, okay, that was a lot. Hopefully that was good for all of you that were listening, and everybody here. So just to recap, we talked about, let me go, if it's anxiety or something else, and the nervous system as being the base of that. We talked about screens, which, you know what? I'm going to put that in the notes too. Anxious generation. I want to give a caveat to this book though. It's a phenomenal book that does show about how screens and anxiety has increased, suicides, all of those things in kids. Now, I love all the research in this book. It is phenomenal, and it does highly encourage like getting off screens and do things. What it does not do is it does not teach you how to do what I've been saying, of how to teach them actually how to handle screens and how to be okay with screens. Like, there's a lot more strategies and tools, like my kids, when they go on playing their video games and stuff, of teaching them how to do it, how to get off. And there's still some days that they struggle, but they understand why they're struggling. They know what's happened in their days. They know. So those are deeper things that I teach. And the book doesn't go into that. Okay. So, yeah. So that is where I would really, so that's the anxious generation we went into with the screens. And then we went into peak minds and how to use the breathing with the 1 deep breath app. And then we talked about attention and using the flashlight. Actually, Amishi Jha talked about the flashlight as well, and the flashlight and floodlight. That's part of her attention research as well in her book, Peak Minds. Okay, so we just have a comment in the chats here. So just everything we've discussed has been amazing. Love to learn so much more about executive functioning. Is it something I offer as a topic or recommendation for someone who does, or a book? Okay, so books are tough because I don't know any that teach it as, I've got podcast episodes on it. If you go to my podcast, and I'll tell you about the books in a sec, but if you go to my podcasts, episodes 85 up to 92, any of them that say EF series is the executive functioning series, and they talk about the base. So I do teach executive functioning as kindling, log, and flame skills. The flame are what we often see, struggling with decisions, struggling with planning. That being said, attention is a big one and it's the bottom. So we may see that one as well. So with the top flame skills, those are the ones like my kid can't organize themselves. They can't get their bag packed. They're forgetting things all the time. They're not listening to instructions. Those a lot are like the upper analyzing, generating, all of those flame skills. So that's what we often see. But if we don't have the kindling to make that fire, and then we don't have the logs to keep the fire going, we can't get to the flame. So all of these pieces are important. So we actually have to start when we're working with kids, working with adults too, is that the kindling skills are set. And those are perception, attention, verbal and nonverbal working memory, inhibition, which is like the impulse control. Those are the log or the flame. The log skills, we get big ones as well, are cognitive flexibility. So black and white thinking, fear of making mistakes, things have to be one way, can't handle change. That's cognitive flexibility. We have initiation, struggling to get started on anything. Time sense and pacing, modulation, self-modulation. So a kid that can't modulate their voice, they don't have a library voice, or they talk too quiet. They may like push really hard playing tag, thinking that all the other kids are pushing the same way, not modulating their moods, right? It's just like heightened or down. They don't have like an in-between. They can't turn the dial on something. For my son too, with writing, it was actually self-modulation. He was squeezing the pencil so hard. He wasn't pushing down on the paper with the pencil. He was squeezing the pencil so hard his fingers got sore. And so it wasn't an occupational therapy struggle with him. It was self-modulation that we had to teach him what too loose was, what too hard was, and what just right was for modulating the intensity. But he's also the kid that, like, if you tap him, he'll hit you back and think that it was the same, like think it was the exact same. And time sense and pacing, self-modulation, self-correcting, self-monitoring and self-correcting. So first monitoring and noticing that they've made a mistake, and then being able to correct it, 2 different EF skills. So those are the kindling, the log, and the flame skills. I do have in my support circle, I've been debating if I'm keeping the support circle open because I'm finding a lot of parents prefer the one-on-one, but I do have more executive functioning help and stuff in there as well, but I teach it one-on-one in my stuff too. So that's helping with that. So books. So here's the struggle with books and executive functioning is that when the science comes down to executive functioning, it's really hard to isolate one executive functioning piece from another. So like, well, attention, Amishi Jha was able to really isolate attention, but when you get into verbal and nonverbal working memory, like they work together. So how do you know which one? So it's hard to just like specifically isolate one quite often. So a lot of the books and research too that have come out, there's a lot more newer stuff coming out. But there's not something that teaches it in like the simple basics. Here's how you do this, right? It took me 9 months of doing 4 to 5, probably more hours a week of studying like each executive functioning pieces. And I'm still in Tara Sumner's group to be learning because she teaches teachers, SLPs, OTs, therapists, all kinds. So I've learned from her for the executive functioning to help my son. Like that's why I had to pull him from school, was because nobody could understand what was happening. And so I've had to figure that out. And I live in Toronto and there's nobody here that, which is crazy, that executive functioning actually understands it to the degree that Tara teaches. And so when I meet executive functioning people, a lot of times when they're teaching it, they're teaching flame skills. They're not teaching like they're like, oh, here, let me give you a checklist. But if the child is struggling with their nonverbal working memory, a checklist is never going to work because they're never going to remember the visuals that they see in the checklist. They can see it when they're doing it, but they'll always have to rely on it if you're not going to then go and help support their help support their nonverbal working memory to help it to know what to do, so you can eventually get rid of the checklist. As well too, like, so verbal and nonverbal working memory, if you don't work to support those, they're always going to forget instructions when you give them. They're always going to say, what did you say? Or they're going to get to the first step and not remember what to do. They may have meltdowns when you're asking them to do things. They may not be able to handle more than one question. Those are verbal and nonverbal working memory, but a lot of them figure like, oh, let's get them planners, like a lot of executive functioning coaches do, and they're doing the high level skills, but not focusing on the lower level skills that really need to be taught from the roots. So it's hard to find a lot of stuff out there on it. But yeah, that's what I teach as well in my one-on-ones. So hopefully that answers your question. If there's anything else, let me know. Feel free to email me, ask me any questions. I'll help as best as I can on all of this. There's never one piece of the puzzle, and there's so much going on with all of these kids that a plan never is perfect the first time. That whenever we do start going, okay, let's try this with this child, we're always going to have to adapt and change and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's amazing when we understand that we have to tweak each plan for these kids to help them. The more that you do see, so like teachers, I know one of them that's in right now in the background of this listening here is a teacher as well. So when you're looking like understanding this executive functioning piece is like eye-opening for teachers. I know Tara Sumner is working at getting it into all schools all over. She doesn't think it's going to happen in her lifetime, but this is the missing piece, because we have the academic, but the executive functioning is like how they actually get the academic on paper. If they can't give a teacher what a teacher's asking for, but academically they know it, it's usually executive functioning. Mood regulations, all of those things are all executive functioning. Perfectionism, fear of making mistake, a lot of anxiety comes from executive functioning. So a lot of stuff we're seeing with kids is on the executive functioning side, because teachers already have a lot of the academic side dialed down. So that's like such a huge missing piece. And my son could go back to school if there was teachers that understood this. I'm trying to get him up to a level, but I can't even find somebody in Toronto to work with my son. The one person who actually works really closely with Tara Sumner is in Toronto. Her booking's full, and she doesn't know of anybody else that teaches the way that Tara does here either, that I'm going to have to do it virtually, because there's only so much as a mom, even though I understand this, that I can do. Sometimes when you are getting into some of these deeper things, they resonate better with somebody else doing it with them and for them. So I'm trying to find somebody to actually help my son. I just haven't been able to find somebody that can work with me in Ontario and help with that. All right. So somebody else just popped on. I'm actually going to let them in. Okay. So someone else just popped on. I'll see if they have any questions. Hey, I just let somebody else into this group. We were just actually signing off, but if you have any specific questions, you can let me know. I don't have you up front, everything. Nobody can see your name. Nobody can hear you unless you'd like to speak and ask me a question, or you can ask your question in the chat. So you can type a question in the chat or anything. The recording I will put in the email. So if you missed, I'll just to let you know, we did just go over anxiety and outbursts. We went over screens and how to help kids with screens, ADHD, attention struggles with kids, and how to help and support them with that. So there's a lot of things that we did cover. So if you have any questions, I'll just give you a few minutes as well. If you want to just type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, and you can unmute yourself if you'd like and ask your question verbally. Nobody will see you, so you will stay anonymous. Hello.
Hi. Hello?
Yes. Do you have a question?
I do. It's been a lot of work to get my little one a diagnosis, because where I am, no one wants to do assessments until they're between the ages of 7 and 9.
Okay.
Which, with what I've seen him demonstrate, and that he's in the principal's office the first month more than anybody be surprised with. and they were making more story letters at 4 years old. I'm like, okay, well, this isn't going to help. So I got Children's First to interject and provide solutions between myself, the teacher, and everything, and my child. The school doesn't want to do an IEP or give him help in that way, just certain adaptation methods without full acknowledgement. So my family doctor advocated for my child when I expressed what's going on and what's happening at school, that it's having an effect. And so we got an assessment earlier than most people do. They tell me I'm ahead of the game, but yet I still feel like there's more to navigate. The diagnosis was ADHD and ODD. And when I asked the psychiatrist, how do we address the sensory issues in terms of auditory, the sensitivity to noise, they're telling him I need an occupational therapist. The schools are supposed to provide that, but again, they are slow to want to kind of just acknowledge that, yes, an IEP and all those measures need to be implemented. So I'm at that impasse where I got to write a letter and I got to show, I pretty much exhausted almost all options, you know, even doing meetings like this to see what else I can learn to accommodate him. So I'm kind of trying to get a feel for what else do other people do with this type of diagnosis, and knowing that I still have to investigate it further.
Yeah. Okay. First off, I yeah, can't imagine all you're going through. I went through this with my son as well, with the outbursts and having to, like, being called 3 to 5 times a week to come pick him up, and the school only wanting to address him when he was in the red and not even dive into what all was going on. It's frustrating and it's lonely, and you're like, how can they not know this? And I'm, how am I the one that's supposed to be navigating this when you probably have kids like this all the time? How can you not know? It's frustrating.
Well,
So
but I think there's like they have their own red tape, right? So where he goes to school, I'm noticing that they have IEPs, but for kids that are like severe deficits, like Down syndrome, severe autism. Basically, if your kid's not throwing a chair, um, they're fine. And I'm like, well, because I actually got him help early enough, he's not at that level. But it doesn't mean the interjection and support's not needed. I even have a psychiatrist letter indicating, and my family doctor saying, go to your MP if you can't get what you need.
yeah, it's hard too. And as you're saying too, like from the teacher's side there, and that's one reason I pulled my son too, is I was like, okay, a teacher, like, and I'm very lucky that I was able to, as I was like, okay, a teacher doesn't need to handle him at this moment with all the other kids in the class. And there's only so much that they can do. There's the red tape, there's all of that stuff. So let's talk about the things that you can do in helping this child, and being able to just understand more of what's going on. So when we look at the ADHD stuff, I think you might find very fascinating if you go back and listen to this, what we talked about. So what we dove into as well, though, is the executive functioning system. And when we look at ODD, so for anybody that's listening to this and doesn't know about ODD, it's oppositional defiance disorder. And basically this child is defiant based on any demands put on them. And it pretty much goes back to what we talked about at the very start of this, that their stress system heightens. So they feel threatened by sometimes just being asked or said good morning to at times, and being asked to do certain things. So every child is different as to how extreme their ODD is. The thing is when you start diving into ODD, there are huge executive functioning struggles behind that ODD. So there are kids too, like in my one son's class, when he was in school, he was in gifted. There was a girl that got gifted and she's ODD. And I'm actually very curious as to how she got into gifted, not because she's not smart, she's very smart, but because she cannot answer questions on a test and do the answers, that they must have had a very good specialist that was able to find that giftedness in her, and that she is academically smart. It's just she can't get any of the answers on paper, or she can't answer them the way that the teacher's asking them. And that is all executive functioning. It's not academic. So this is where quite often too in class is, as we were speaking of earlier, is that executive functioning, the research that's coming out is a lot newer. And it's not where teachers are taught yet. It's slowly getting into the teacher system. And any teachers that I do speak of are like, oh my God, we so need this to understand these kids. So
Yeah, it makes sense. I need you to sit.
So what I would suggest is on my podcast, I have episodes 85 to 92.
Okay.
In there, they say EF series. And I would start going through those base executive functioning. And I have a feeling with the ODD, you're going to start seeing so many patterns between the ODD and the executive functioning struggles.
Like that.
Especially the impulse, the where they have struggle with impulse control. That's a big ODD, but the reason that the impulse control is quite often happening is because other things they're kind of masking and struggling with as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that the school's not versed in. The thing with IEPs as well is that, like, the way that an IEP is written is it's like, so the one thing I'm familiar with too is it'll be like a learning disability and written expression. But what that means could be so many things. So when a teacher's reading that, they're like, okay, but what does that mean to this child? Right? So there's one thing about having the IEP in order to be able to let the teacher know that there are struggles that are diagnosed, but the teacher still needs, which is another episode I have that was phenomenal with Courtney Hobbs. There's an episode with Courtney Hobbs. I'll put that in the show notes or in the email. I'll put that episode too. She's a high school teacher, and she said that whenever a kid had an IEP, so even without having an IEP, it was so invaluable for the teacher for the parent to say, this is what you'll start noticing in my child, and this is what it means, and these are the tools we've been able to like help them with. So even the things you might notice with attention will be different with your child versus another child. The things that you'll notice in their ODD will be different with your child versus another child. So it's the more information you can give that teacher of what they're going to see. And we went through that a lot in that episode with Courtney Hobbs. It was such a great episode to really bridge that gap, even without having an IEP. But when you have an IEP, like a teacher reads it and they're like, but what does that mean for this child? Like, what does that mean? Because there's such generic things almost on an IEP. So I would really, really, really start diving into executive functioning, which start going through those lessons, and that might start opening your eyes to other things of these struggles with your child with the ADD, ADHD, and ODD. The auditory sensory as well. My son hugely with that, like can't tap fingers even at the table when it's quiet. Once I took him out of school, he needed 6 months of pure quiet in our house before, what's it called? He needs 6 months of before he actually could handle other sounds and start going out and doing other things, because of how much auditory was happening in the school and how overwhelming it was for his system. He just wasn't able to handle so much sound because of how amazing he hears sounds. And an executive functioning skill is self-modulation. So it's being able to turn up and down a dial. And so if they can't turn up and down a dial of their voice in a library or the sounds that they're hearing or their touch. So my son as well, self-modulation for him was the sound and it was touch. So if they're playing tag and a kid touches, or say we go by and we like tap him, he'll hit us back and think that he hit at the intensity that we tapped him. And that's modulation and not understanding the dial, which is an executive functioning skill. It's an executive functioning struggle. So once you start really understanding the executive functioning pieces and your child's behavior, you start seeing them through such a different light, in that your child is struggling every single day to do these things that we almost think should just be natural and they should just know how to do. And once you start seeing that not as bad behavior, but seeing it as, oh, where is this child struggling with these skills? Like ODD is all executive functioning, all executive functioning skills. There was this girl with ODD in my son's class, and when we went on a class trip, they were doing the spaceship thing. That was super cool. And they were all at a space station at their desk, and they all had a specific job. She moved everything around. She was supposed to have her instructions on the booklet, as to what order she was supposed to do things. And as I was watching her, I'm like, she doesn't know, she can't follow multiple steps. I'm like, that's verbal, nonverbal working memory. Like she more just created, I'm going to say created chaos in her station, more so because of masking that she couldn't do it. And it's not that she academically couldn't do it. It was like verbal and nonverbal working memory of not being able to read the steps and get those steps in her mind of what she has to do out, and then being able to focus and attention. Also inhibition, like she couldn't stop herself from doing things, stop herself from interrupting other kids or going to other people's desks and just taking somebody's pen, right? Like she just could not stop. And those are, I'm like, I'm looking at her and seeing all of the executive functioning struggles she had versus this is ODD. I'm like, this kid is struggling. They are masking so much to get through their day, so much to get through their day. And my heart went out to her. And instead she's told, read this, do these steps, and she can't. So she's constantly masking. And then you have these outbursts because you're embarrassed, shame, anger, frustration. They're probably feeling lonely that nobody's understanding them. And it's all executive functioning skills at the base of it all.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, how do you get that across with the school? Because it's like they it's like they're supposed to call in this area the people that handle the OT at the school, and then they're telling me to do it. And my doctor's telling me, no, you're supposed to get the school to do it. So I'm having to advocate for my child, and other people have schools come to them and say, no, this is what your child needs. But because this child, like, you know, has these needs and there's other high needs kids in the school, they're like, well, he doesn't really need it, you know, but I'm like, this doesn't make sense. You're going to wait until he's in outburst like before. And then I interjected, and it's like, I got a, you know, like I said, a supporting letter from a psychiatrist saying he needs more implementation. So it's like trying to figure out how to navigate what's very clear, because he's just 5. And I understand that like some kids outgrow things, but these diagnoses will not be outgrown, you
There's
know?
a difference as well of he's 5 and it's a bit of a struggle, and he's 5 and this is affecting every day of his daily life. He can't even manage and function in his daily life in school, right? There's a difference between those. So what I'm going to say to the schools is it was fascinating because our gifted program was in another school. So my one son was in one school, my other son is in another. And in one school where my son that I ended up pulling out was, that principal was not supportive as the teachers. The principal was not supportive of getting IEPs, of helping these kids, of doing any of that stuff. And the teachers knew it. Like the counselor at that school only would talk to me on the phone or in person, would never do anything in writing with me ever. And so it got to the point where I was struggling so much that my other son's school was amazing. I emailed the principal of his school, and I emailed him and I said, I'm getting calls. He's out of school 2 days a week already. Like we take him out Tuesdays and Thursdays just so he can manage. He's still getting calls on Fridays that he can't handle being there. We had a code with the teacher. I was perfectly fine with it. Like the teacher and I worked together on it. I'm like, all of these things are happening. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I go, is there anything? He hopped on a phone with me 15 minutes later and he said, because this, and this is happening, if your son is already out, they can't handle, he needs this, they need to be doing this. These are what they should be offering you. And he gave me a whole list of things to go back to the other school and ask. He also said because of the dysgraphia, he should be having a computer to help him with text to speech, all of these things. And I went back and the school said no to absolutely everything. So every
Oh my God.
different, and this is the same school district, right? And so the principal makes a huge difference. The support the teachers get from the principal makes a huge difference. There's and their understanding of what's going on. And it just makes, yeah, I'm getting something from this teacher here who's saying neurodiversity is not something that's part of the college education. It's not. It's newer. It's very misunderstood. And so the neurodiversity is one thing, and the executive functioning. So there might be people that really understand neurodiversity, but they still don't understand executive functioning to the degree. And then this, they've spent so much time learning on their own and would love more offered in college as well as the school system, and not just for the special ed staff. So I'm going to tell you, the teacher that's in here, go look up Seeds of Learning. That's the course I'm in. She's actually opened up her course, and I would suggest for that teacher to go do it on her executive.
Which course?
So that's the course I took as a practitioner. So she teaches therapists. That's where I've learned all the executive functioning. So that's the course I would suggest for teachers to take. It's Seeds of Learning, or occupational therapists, or speech and language pathologists.
Okay.
I would suggest them to take her course. That's who I've learned from. She only opens it up twice a year, and her doors are opened, I think, just now for the one course that she starts teaching over the summer on executive functioning. So I'm in that course as well. To the teacher, I'm just not saying names, but to the teacher that's in here, I'm in that course too. So you'll see me in there, but that's for a teacher that I would say. So, but for a parent advocating, I teach the parents a lot of this stuff. My podcast episodes will for sure give you a good base of understanding. And then it's where, like, I could help you craft a document for a parent or for a teacher's to help them understand. You know what? I'm going to pull up my screen right now. I'm going to show you this.
Okay, buddy. We got to wait for your doctor's appointment, right?
Can I share my screen?
Here, I'm gonna pick it up. Don't worry.
So I'm just going to share this. So this is my executive function. This is how I teach it. So all of my podcast episodes are all of these base kindling skills. Cognitive flexibility and initiation are the ones that I have. So I have 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 podcast episodes on executive functioning that will get you going. Those are things as well that, as a parent in here, that you could suggest these podcast episodes. I would grab the link of each and suggest, if your child is struggling in a certain one, to have the teacher even say, hey, this is a great podcast episode all on this that dives into what my child is experiencing, so that you'll actually like be able to understand it. This is what it presents as. These are the tools and skills we've learned that work for him, or these are the things you'll start seeing before he has an outburst. If you can catch it then, this is what would help.
Kind of like what the daycare did before he went into school with the Children's First in the area. They did exactly that. And because of the ratio, whenever they seen something going on, they kind of nipped it before it could even happen.
Yeah.
Where the ratio, that's not possible. So I try to advocate for his needs, and also knowing the teacher must be also suffering. And yet, you know, they fight it, and it's definitely wild. Like, I have a friend, she's unfortunately palliative, but she was a principal, and she says, listen, they're not doing this wrong. These are your rights. And oh my God.
Yeah.
Every step that I've found a blockage at, you know, or what they should be doing, she's been spot on.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So with all of this, like, we're dealing with the fact that teachers don't have enough support. I mean, here in our district, they've taken all special ed out. They've now mixed all the kids together, all of the kids of all the struggles together, and they've taken out in kindergarten the extra staff that helped, the EAs that helped in class. Like, it's crazy that the teachers, what they're handling now is, and also because of like a lot of struggles are happening more as well now with these kids, that all of these things are like piling on these teachers, and there is only so much they can do. That when you're coming at the teacher or to the teacher with understanding, caring, and support, like, I know how much you've got on your plate. I'm going to try to give you enough tools and skills and information so that you can nip him in the bud, so you're not dealing with a full outburst in him. This is what you'll notice. This is what you see. Like, if you can give that to a teacher and give it in a way, in all of the wording of, this is going to support you the best with this child. I understand what the struggles are. This is what we're doing at home to help him. These are the research. Even with some teachers, you can give, this is a podcast, like, give them these podcast episodes. These are the things that, you know, will start to, will help take stress off your plate during the school year with this child, and let them know, I'm here to support you anyway. Don't wait for parent teacher interviews. call me if you need help and support. We will talk through this and I will help work with you. I understand that my child is not the easiest and we're working on everything we can to support him. And I get that. So if you come to a teacher with that as well, because they're often met with, you need to do this for my child. And, you know, my child's not getting the support. What are you going to do? And the teacher's like drowning and going, oh my God. But if you can come to the teacher and sometimes bypass, if it's a principal that's not supportive, if you can bypass that, because that's where we had, my son's teacher was phenomenal. We had a code word. He would just say, I have a tummy ache, when he knew his Coke bottle was about to explode. And the teacher knew he needed to call me, because if he didn't, my son was going to explode in his class and I'd come and get him. And that was it, right? And my son would come home and it was all like, we had this strategy with the teacher because the principal wasn't helping us to give strategy. So the teacher and I worked on things together to make it the best possible for the teacher and for my son while we were working on solutions.
Yeah, because this principal's like, well, we don't see any struggles yet. And I'm like, well, that's not true, because at the beginning, right? And he says academically there's not struggles. And I'm like, well, that's not possible, because when I took him to sports and different things, it to kind of get a feel for things, the soccer had a lot of meltdowns compared to the baseball with the type of instructions. And he just sits on the field and has a full meltdown. If a ball or something hits him, he's good. He's very good with precision. If you teach him step by step more, kind of like the baseball, it's better. He's conquered both at this point. But whenever something hits him, like, he shuts down. I don't know if that's ever going to change.
It really will. In fact, so you're already ahead of me, because my son couldn't even play sports. Like, he still isn't where he could do an organized sport, because same thing. Well, it's for him, it's perfectionism, fear of making mistakes. He's getting much better with that. And part of it too is if it's more than one instruction at a time, he can't handle it. For him too was soccer, because visually he remembers everything and he'd go, they just hit me 27 times, and he'd push the kid. It's like, we're just going for the same ball and he just brushed you. So that is the modulation. It's the perception. These are all executive skills. It was his perception that kid was picking on him.
Yeah, no, I get exactly that.
Right. So these are things where, like, okay, once we start changing the lens and being like, this is an executive functioning skill, this is perception, we need to work on the perception on this, which I didn't have those skills when he was that age, because I was still learning all of this. But yeah, it makes such a difference. And this teacher is saying too, they're going to make a form, get to know my child. Yeah. And ask that too. Like, does your child have meltdowns? Does your child have anger or anxiety? If so, what signs do you see before it happens? What helps with your child? Like, these are all amazing things for a teacher to have before they go in.
I feel like they're not given these things. It's like, I work in healthcare. I'm a PSW, and we have a lot of dementia people, and the grid on how that works, like, they have like BSO and stuff that, it's very similar. If you don't notice the nonverbal cues, you can agree. If you agree with them and just smile, they'll be happy. Even if you said backwards words, it has nothing to do with it. It's like, there's a weird functioning factor to that. And I don't know, I'm finding with my little one, there's similarities on finding those trigger points in order to avoid the behavior, because the behavior isn't from what you see at that moment. It's built up the whole time. And it's hard to even explain that to, the principal. It's like and like, he may tell you, no, I don't need noise canceling headphones. And then they're encouraging going without it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But then when it's became overstimulating, because he's trying to conquer not needing them, but he does. And then they're trying to see if he can outgrow it, because many kids do. But I really don't feel like that will be a thing with him, because since he's been a baby, this has been an issue. It doesn't just appear at 3 years old.
Right.
You'll notice that when he's dealt with too much stimulation, and if you don't have the foresight to see that, then you won't be able to avoid that meltdown that comes.
Right, exactly. And so that's my Coke bottle analogy, that the Coke bottle shakes. When the Coke bottle finally explodes, it's because of all the shakes that happened before it. And that could just be that your child is even worrying that there's going to be noise at school, right? Is one shake. right? So every single shake, if they're not able to remember multiple instructions and they struggle every single day to get that backpack packed, to get out the door because their nonverbal working memory struggles to visually remember what goes in it every day, that is going to shake their Coke bottle. So their Coke bottle is constantly shaking, constantly. And that's all executive functioning system stuff. So yeah, it's crazy. All right. Take care. The one teacher's leaving. We do have to wrap up this call as well, because it was supposed to end 10 minutes ago. But has that been helpful at all? Like, start diving into executive functioning. That's what I would do to my things. I teach it as well. I teach how to be helping and handling it with your kids. And yeah, diving into that piece will be hugely important. So those episodes I think will be amazing for you. I would also suggest that you go back and listen to this recording. I have back-to-back meetings and clients all day.
Okay.
I'll eventually get this out later today or tomorrow. I'll get the recording out. And so when it comes to your inbox, listen to it. It dove into attention, ADHD and stuff too, and a little bit more about the nervous system. So that'll be helpful for you as well. With the teachers, it really is making your one sheet for them, helping them understand your child, because even with an IEP, like, it's so generic that even
I'm struggling to get that in place. Like, I'm struggling right now to get that, because I need the OT assessment to assess the sensory factor. In the classroom, they put a wobble cushion, so they've had to acknowledge that interjection there. I brought his noise canceling headphones, even though I have a feeling he doesn't use them enough. So by the time I get him, I kind of get the handful of it.
yeah.
And I do things to kind of keep him emotionally regulated as much as I can on my end, because I know that lets him kind of get through his day. Previously, when he was younger, because I got Children's First involved when he was quite young, to kind of help him learn different ways to express himself. And I think that's a big part of maybe why I get that comment. I'm ahead of the game in certain ways sometimes. Because he did a cognitive therapy course, and that was like ridiculously helpful. I almost feel like all these kids should be doing it, and the teachers, because his ability to express himself has reduced those meltdowns a lot.
Yeah, it's almost like if kindergarten and junior and senior kindergarten were instead working on social emotional regulation, working on teaching them about breath work to strengthen their resting system, teaching them about, expressing their emotions, the CBT, like all of those things, cognitive behavioral therapy, like all of those things. If it was to help with all of that to start, and working on executive functioning before they even started the academics, huge. It would be, that's my dream. That would be my dream for school, but it's not. And so what you're doing though sounds phenomenal. I want you to know that it's frustrating. It's lonely. What you are doing though is exactly what everything you could and should be doing with the school. Keep fighting, keep fighting. Like, it so depends on the principal, the supports they have. Sometimes you'll find too that if you reach out to the teachers on the side, they are able to help and support in ways. If you bypass sometimes the principal, if the principal isn't helping in the way that you need in order to really help them understand your child, because and if you come at it in the way with the parent or with the teacher of, this is going to help you like have less outbursts and get, like, if you even tell them too that, I know that he may not seem like he needs his headphones, but you'll have less outbursts if he has them on. Feel free to test it out one day or 1 week of him wearing them more and 1 week of them not. And it may or may not, but if it can bring less outbursts in your classroom and make your life easier for you, you may want to have them wear them more often. So if you word it as well, and how is this going to help the teacher?
Yeah,
that
makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Hopefully this has been helpful.
No, it doesn't help to have people that like experience the same struggles, because it's difficult otherwise.
It so is. It's so lonely. Absolutely. Okay. I'm an email away, completely an email away. So let me know.
Okay, sounds great.
Also, like the support circle, I'm I've been debating on if I'm going to keep it open or not, because I'm finding more people want one-on-one versus wanting a group to chat in. But as I'm
I
doing,
think you learn. I think you learn from the group, because when I did cognitive therapy with him, it was a group of parents and a group of children, and we did it individually, like, well, not individually, but like the parents were in a separate group and the kids in a separate group, and then you'd come together and it helped you understand, because believe it or not, it's like, I'm not neurodivergent, but many of those other parents clearly were. So they were triggering each other.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting. If they don't learn to maintain their own and focus more on what they're doing, then what you're doing isn't almost going to help the kid, because what you're doing has a big effect on them.
Mhm.
You know, and teaching them like green light, red light, you know, thoughts and things like that is a way to teach it in a way a child can understand,
Mhm.
because the adult words aren't going to do nothing for these, like, you know, 3 to 6 year olds that are throwing shit and doing all the crazy stuff, you know.
Right. No, completely. So
No, but it was really effective. But those, it was group wise, it was interesting to see, because the one children's first lady, she's like, your kid's so great. He's so easy. And I'm like, he's struggling. I don't get this. And then when I see she deals with children with more struggles and stuff, it teaches you kind of what everyone's doing. You're learning something different off of everyone.
mm,
And you kind of see like what's effective and what's not. I don't know. I found it useful as a
yeah.
group. Some things are individual, yes, because some things are unique to my child that maybe with each child is individualized, but as a group, you know, a regular group of kids isn't going to understand.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No. And that's no, I totally agree with that too. And not feeling alone, and seeing, and the questions other people ask too, sometimes like, I didn't think of asking that. Now that's like super helpful. So yeah, it all comes together. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to close this off because I do have to get to
Okay.
another meeting as well.
Yeah.
I will email this out to
Okay.
everybody once I have it all up and like recorded, and the summary notes and all of that stuff. I'll put that out there. Hopefully I get it done tonight, but I am like back to back and I'm solar parenting all day.
Okay. Yeah,
So
sounds great.
yeah, if not, it'll be out tomorrow in email. So you guys will get it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. And then just ask any more questions. I'll help as best as I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.